Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of my work here today. Yeah, I'm excited because of my history with Cornell to be a part of this meeting. So the work that I'm going to present today has to do with ACC and the work that I've been doing here over the past year on both apples and peaches in Michigan. So this is work that I've been doing in collaboration with Phil Schwalier and Amy Irish Brown, who many of you probably know well for all of the work that they've done on PGRs over the past many years. Phil recently retired, and I am currently filling his position, or trying to. And we have two fantastic technicians, Denise Ruersma and Gail, or Peach Filer, we call her, and they've been integral to these projects. Also, I work with Todd Einhorn, who is a professor in horticulture at MSU, our fruit physiologist. So this is not a project that I've been working on alone. So for those of you that don't know where I'm located, I am just north of Grand Rapids here in what we call Fruit Ridge, and this is where about, well, much more than half of the production of apples is in Michigan. And so a lot of Michigan is known for having very sandy soils, but this is actually a topographic feature, the ridge, that is a little bit higher in elevation and heavier soil. So it's an ideal production area for apples. And so that's primarily in Kent County. But other regions of the state also have very diverse fruit production. And Polly covered really thoroughly what ACC is, so I'm not going to cover any of this in detail, especially since you guys are sticking around to the end of the day on Friday. So to jump right into the trials that I'd like to share with you, first I'll talk about ACC for thinning apples, and the objectives that we were interested in covering had to do with how effective ACC was as a late season thinner, but also if it can be used as an earlier season thinner. So during that 10 to 12 millimeter window primarily. So in this year, the trials that we conducted were all in the Brookfield Gala on G11 that were planted in 2017 to a tall spindle system, or a super spindle system, excuse me. And these were all conducted using an air blast application calibrated to 100 gallons per acre. And we did the completely randomized design with all of the different treatments. To give you an idea of what the thinning conditions were in our region this year, you can see we had a pretty significant carbohydrate deficit during the 8 to 10 millimeter window due to some really warm conditions. And then during the later rescue thinning period, we had a little bit cooler weather and had a little bit of a surplus. So that was going to affect our thinning efficacy. And so the first trial results that I'll show you, we evaluated several different treatments at the 8 to 10 millimeter window. So one application was made for each of these treatments, and it was Maxell 7 as a grower standard, and then ACC or Maxell in combination or with other materials. And so you can see the results that we had from this trial included our untreated check on the left here compared to our standard Maxell 7, which was fairly close to our crop load and target, that is this dashed line. And then all of the other treatments were not significantly different than each other and provided some thinning, but was not significantly different than our untreated control. And partly this is because we had a number of frost events this year, and so we expected to have very low number of fruit. So we were cautious during our thinning and only used this one application at 8 to 10 millimeters. But we ended up having a really heavy crop load. And so I think that contributed to the lack of difference between treatments. But overall, what we saw was some thinning with these combinations at 8 to 10 millimeters. And we think they would obviously be better in combination with earlier applications as part of a complete program, as opposed to standing alone, which is not how we operate in general thinning practices anyway. We did see some differences in fruit weight, but that was always correlated with the amount of thinning. We saw a minor amount of phytotoxicity, so I'm showing you what we observed for the different treatments. There was never a significant difference in our phytotoxicity evaluation. And generally what we saw was just a little bit of yellowing in the spur leaves in the interior of the canopy. And so we don't believe that that was meaningful in any way. Although it can look like you have some yellowing of foliage, we don't think that that's having a significant negative impact. So this is a trial that Phil conducted in 2020, looking at ACC in that 20 millimeter window. And so first I'm just showing you the untreated control compared to the hand thinned check. And you can see the hand thinned check was pretty close to his target crop load in those blue bars. And then the red dots are showing the average fruit weight. So again, the average fruit weight in this experiment always correlated with the amount of thinning. And so these were some of the grower standards. He applied NAAN7 or Maxil at 7 at petal fall, or he did 2 sprays of NAAN7 at petal fall and at 10 millimeters. And you can see the standalone treatments didn't provide very much thinning, and 2 applications over thinned quite a bit. And then he looked at 3 different applications or treatments of ACC in that 20 millimeter window. The standalone treatment on the left here didn't provide very much thinning alone either, but when that was combined with a thinning application made at petal fall, either NAN7 or Maxil7, it was pretty close to the target crop load. So this is just evidence that ACC in that 20 millimeter window isn't going to provide very much thinning alone, but when you use it in combination with an earlier thinning application as part of a complete program, it's a very effective thinner. And we're seeing more thinning with ACC than Maxil7 alone or NAN7 alone too. So it's looking like a very promising product for a season-long thinning program. And just some conclusions that I already elaborated on. Greater thinning at the 20 millimeter window. We think that's really where this product is going to fit for apple thinning. And minimal phytotoxicity, although it is evident, we don't think it's a significant problem or concern. And so we're going to continue to look at this material at different timings and in different combinations with other thinning materials. So the second part of my talk is looking at ACC and peaches and just some work that we did over the past year. So for this work, we set up some trials in 2 commercial orchards, and we looked at only 3 different treatments. We looked at an untreated control, and then either 1 or 2 applications of ACC at 20% bloom, and then about 4 days later at 100% bloom. And so these orchards were located in Sparta and Kent City, which are both on Peach Ridge or Apple Ridge, Fruit Ridge here in Kent County. And these were also done as an air blast trial, calibrated to 100-gallon tank, or calibrated to 100 gallons per acre. And the application rate was 300 parts per million. And so we observed significant senescence about 4 days after the first ACC treatment as just some browning of flowers. And then there was a pretty dramatic difference in the number of fruit per treatment. So just walking down these rows, it was very evident that we were having significant thinning effect. And we evaluated this about a month after the thinning treatments were conducted. So beforehand thinning took place, but after we thought natural fruit drop had concluded. We saw some minimal phytotoxicity. There was a little bit of yellowing of leaves, but like Polly said, we think it's a pretty safe material, and that was true in this trial. I was unable to collect thinning data or phytotoxicity data in this trial because it happened right around the time I was busy with some apple work, but we hope to continue doing that work in the future. And so this is just to show us about 1 month after the treatment, you can see there's a lot of great green foliage on the trees, but a really significant difference in the number of fruit on the trees. So the data looking at the thinning effects, looking at the graph on the right, this is just PF Lucky 13. We did this in 4 different cultivars on the first commercial orchard. And you can see there was a really nice dose effect for the number of treatments that were applied and the amount of thinning. And then we also did that in 3 other cultivars, so PF23, All-Star, and Starfire, and we had a similar rate effect or dose effect with the number of treatments that were applied. In the second orchard, we looked at a number of 3 different cultivars, Bright Star, All-Star, and Red Haven. And again, we saw a similar effect to the untreated compared to 1 or 2 applications of ACC. We saw a nice step down in the amount of thinning. And this is measured as fruit per bud. And that was true for all 3 cultures. The other thing that I did was evaluate hand thinning time in these 2 different orchards. So I counted that, or I spent a whole day I spent a whole day in each orchard following crews around and counting how long it took them to thin 1 tree and calculating an average time. In orchard 1, I followed a crew of 2 and I evaluated thinning for the whole tree, and I also looked at top and bottom separately. And this is because we were seeing more thinning in the bottom of the tree instead of the top of the tree, and I was just interested in whether there was a difference in the hand thinning time. And so what we found was there was, similar to the thinning effects, a reduction in hand thinning time per tree with an increased rate. There wasn't so much difference in the tops and the bottoms in the second and third bar in each of these groups, but that could be related to climbing up and down ladders and things like that as well. And then in the second orchard, I followed 2 different crews, and I only evaluated untreated and 2 applications of ACC. But again, you can see a noticeable reduction in the amount of time required for hand thinning. The workers were actually complaining there was too much foliage. They couldn't find the fruit in a lot of cases. And I think that's a good sign that it did a great job thinning. And overall, in both of these orchards, we've had about half the amount of time required for hand thinning with 2 applications of ACC. This is an additional trial that was conducted at another location. So we have recently a new research station in West Central Michigan. So this is in Hart. It's about 2 hours north of where I'm located. And John Baker conducted this trial in some processing peaches in Venture. It's an older block this year. And so this is just his replicated trial design looking at similar treatments, control compared to ACC applied at pink once, or at pink and then again at 30% bloom. And so he did some pre-thinning evaluations where they thinned the trees and collected the fruit that were thinned. And so he weighed the total, he counted the total number of fruit that were thinned and then weighed and counted those fruit in order to see how much fruit was required to be hand thinned. And so the results of that work, he showed that there was a really huge reduction in the amount of fruit that was thinned per tree with a greater application of ACC. He did some pre-harvest evaluations as well. And so in the control, he found there were smaller than average fruit size, and then a pretty normal maturity window. But in the ACC applications, there were significantly fewer fruit, which is great, resulting in much larger fruit. And then the harvest maturity window was advanced by about a week. Some other observations from both of our work is there was slightly earlier ripening and potentially a compressed harvest window. So this is something that we want to continue looking at. Another observation that we made, I won't say that this is a concern, is that there were split pits in these trials, but I think that might be more related to variety susceptibility. It's something that we want to continue to look at. I know for sure one of the varieties that we evaluated, the grower actually took out after the season because it's so prone to split pits. So just something to be looking at. So overall, we're very excited. Every grower that I work with that is growing peaches is interested in applying more ACC to their orchard because they see the utility of the product. It's very exciting to be a part of. And as Pollyanna said, the 2022 availability is limited. I think they're calling it a grower experience that is available just for certain growers and research. So we're going to continue research on this in the future, looking at different rates and timings. We're interested in how different environmental conditions are affecting the thinner, both in peaches and apples, and then how it's affecting the harvest window and the fruit quality. So we want to do more harvest evaluations this year. So thank you again, Mike, for including me in this program. And I just want to say thank you to all of our collaborators. We've had some great grower collaborators that we couldn't do this work without. And I appreciate your time.